It seems to me that Mark Golding, the Mark Golding led People's National Party, would like to have its cake and eat it too. What do I mean by that? They would have the Jamaican people believe the current efforts of the Holness government to ease the burdens of the cost of living crisis are at once insufficient and also too late. And by itself, that may well have been enough as a political strategy, cynical though it is. The difficulty arises when one recognizes the very people who are telling the Jamaican people that the efforts of the Holness government are insufficient and too late are also the same people who have so far taken what appears to me to be a perpetual vow of silence on what exactly they would do differently or better than the current government. So yes, they would like to have the cake and they would like to eat it too. Now, it is true, of course, that the PNP president and the opposition leader did lay out broad outlines of a plan at his party's most recent conference. I do not take that from him. But the scale and the complexity of the cost of living crisis Jamaicans now face does not lend itself to being solved by broad sketches and sound bites, catchy though they may be. The crisis requires concrete steps that are grounded in sound fiscal policy. And this is where leadership and ideation wins the day. So take, for instance, the recently announced planned reduction in GCT on electricity. That is a tangible step. And whether one thinks it inadequate is a genuine matter that can be debated. It's a genuine policy debate that can be had. And we should have it as a country. But what cannot be countenanced and should not be countenanced is a debate where one side refuses to show its hand and believes it can win an election through a strategy of smoke and mirrors. And then there's a $20,000 cash give back. Here's the PNP's spokesperson on social transformation, Patricia Duncan Sutherland, raising an alarm without an alternative.
Originally, this $20,000, which is funded by borrowing against our future earnings for the next 12 years from the Airport Authority, was supposed to be an incentive for revenue generation. So it was supposed to be a tax credit to incentivize people to file their tax returns. And they didn't meet that target. Now they want to just give $20,000 to anybody 18 and over. And they have not identified a specific criteria. This smacks of a vote buying kind of scheme. So instead of us being able to address real needs of people, we're just trying to find a way to get re-elected using the government's money, and money that we don't have, money that we are actually borrowing from future earnings.
Listen to her carefully. She says, instead of seeking to address, quote, the real needs of people, the government has launched a policy that smacks of vote buying. The obvious question is, what are those real needs, Mrs. Duncan Sutherland? How do you propose to address them in a different way? And let's say we take you at your very best, your absolute best, as the debaters would say, and this is indeed a vote-buying scheme. How would you ensure it is not? Because it cannot be that you will say the government should publish a criteria that was already made manifestly clear that such a criteria would come from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. So what would you do differently? Listeners, I fear the cold truth is that the PNP knows that this policy initiative has proven popular. You just take a cursory scroll on any social media platform and you will see, especially the young PAYE workers celebrating the cash give back. The PNP knows it has proven popular, and in a perverse and cynical way, they are seeking to discredit it for their own narrow political ends. That is not a strategy that suggests they are interested in solutions. It seems to me they are interested in exploiting grievance to win an election without ever having to account for how they would offer better solutions. The Jamaican people must reject this. My granny would have said, we can't buy puss in a bag. Now, none of that is to say the government must not be held to account for transparent and diligent spending as an election looms. They absolutely should. And I trust the Auditor General will keep her eyes peeled on the disbursement of these funds. But there is reason enough to believe that this will be a transparent and above board as any of the other recent cash givebacks under this government. After all, billions have been disbursed under programs like the COVID Care Program, and we have not heard any oversight voices raised on questions of corruption or nepotism. And that's just it. The PNP's job becomes that much more difficult at discrediting this government's efforts because they have done a lot of it before and proven that it can be done, even when confronted by the naysayers and the loud voices of dissonance. And I do not for a second suggest that anyone has to like Andrew Holness. Indeed, you may well have cause for pause on some of the promises that he has made that have not been kept. You know them, I've spoken to them before. But it is simply not true to suggest this has not been a government that has delivered for the Jamaican people. Yes, challenges persist. Yes, there are difficult challenges. But to suggest that this government has not worked at alleviating them is an act of pure malice. So, can Golding's PNP deliver more or better? Perhaps they can. Maybe they do have those plans. But they must show us that they can. They must tell us precisely how they will. Because if Mr. Golding and his lot intends to be taken seriously and intends to engage in the arena of ideas, it must, as a matter of urgency, the PNP must begin to lay out precisely how it would spend differently, prioritize differently, and deliver differently. Anything else simply misses the mark. And you know, history is a stern teacher. And if it has taught me anything, it's that we must be wary of the politics of grievance. We must be wary of those who exploit our frustrations without ever telling us how they will ease them. For the first time in a very long time, this country enters into an election period where a real contest of ideas is possible. But that possibility cannot be realized if one side refuses to show its hand, while repeatedly telling us that this lot is not good enough. You can't have your cake and eat it too, Mr. Golding. You just can't. My granny would have said, no sanky, no sing so. That's what's on my mind.